Thanksgiving was always meant to be a time for family, a day of celebration, gratitude, and togetherness. For years, it had been a tradition that brought our family together. Despite the chaos of everyday life, I had spent countless hours in the kitchen preparing the perfect meal. Golden turkey with crispy skin, mashed potatoes so creamy they could melt in your mouth, rich gravy, cranberry sauce that was just the right balance of tart and sweet. The smell of the feast filled the house, and the laughter of loved ones echoed through every room. But that Thanksgiving, everything felt different. The warmth of the day seemed distant, as though a cold draft had crept in unnoticed. Something in the air was off, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself that it was just a phase, that everything would return to normal. After all, Thanksgiving was a day to celebrate the bonds we shared, wasn't it? Yet, something inside me felt like I was losing control of those bonds, slipping further and further away from the person I loved the most in this world, my son. Michael. My name is Sophia, and I have spent my entire life working to build a future for my family. I became a mother at a young age, and Michael, my only child, became the center of my universe. I loved him more than anything. I did everything I could to provide him with opportunities that I never had growing up. As a single mother, I worked hard, often late into the night, just to make sure he was cared for, that he had everything he needed. I remember those early years, how I would tuck him into bed after a long day of work. Always exhausted, but always making sure he knew how much I loved him. I made up for the time I couldn't spend with him by giving him everything I thought he wanted. Toys, electronics, whatever his friends had. I convinced myself that material things would fill the void of my absence. I worked long hours, sacrificed weekends, and missed so many moments of his childhood. But in my mind, I was doing it all for him. I was building a future, providing a life where he wouldn't have to worry about the things I had when I was his age. But somewhere along the way, I lost him. The years went by, and the distance between us grew. When Michael was young, he would run to greet me after school, his face lighting up when he saw me, even if I was tired or stressed. But those moments became fewer and farther between. As he entered his teenage years, he became more independent, less interested in spending time with me. He started to withdraw into his own world, friends, school, and eventually, his own life outside of our home. I tried to be there for him, tried to maintain some semblance of the closeness we once had, but it wasn't the same. He became more distant, and I began to feel like I was losing him, and I didn't know how to stop it. Still, I tried to hold on. I continued to pour everything into my work. It was what I knew, what I had always done. The company I had built from scratch was thriving. I had become a success by every metric that mattered in the business world. Yet, at home, things weren't so perfect. Michael had grown into a young adult, and it was clear that our relationship was strained. We would have dinner together, but the conversations were awkward. He was polite, but the warmth we once shared was gone. I missed his laughter, the sound of him calling out to me when he needed help with something. I missed being his go-to person, but I didn't know how to fix it. Thanksgiving that year should have been different. I have prepared the meal with my usual care, my hope that this year would be different this year. We would reconnect. But as the day wore on, I could feel the strain between us. Michael barely spoke. When he did, his answers were short, as though he were somewhere else, mentally distant. I had tried to engage him, asking about his work, his life, but each time I asked, he seemed uninterested. His eyes avoided mine, and I could see a subtle discontentment in his posture, a quiet resentment that I couldn't shake off. When it came time to eat, I served him his plate, full of his favorite dishes. But he didn't seem to appreciate it. He barely touched his food, picking at it listlessly, like he was just going through the motions. The small talk we made felt forced. I tried to laugh, to bring up memories from when he was younger, hoping it would spark some warmth, some connection, that he didn't engage. Instead, he sat there, almost like a stranger. The tension hung heavy in the room, thick and uncomfortable. I couldn't remember the last time we had shared a real conversation without awkward silences or half-hearted responses. The realization hit me like a wave. I had lost my son. I had spent so much time trying to build a life for him, to give him everything he wanted, and in the process, I had neglected the most important thing, our relationship. After dinner, I offered to clean up, but Michael got up and walked away without a word. I watched him head for the kitchen, but instead of joining me to clean up like we used to, he opened the fridge and pulled out the leftover food. My heart sank as he stacked the containers on the counter, handing them to me without even looking at me. "Here," he said flatly, his voice cold. "This is all you deserve." His words were so quiet, but they felt like a slap in the face. I stood, frozen, unable to move, my hands shaking as I stared at the containers in front of me. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. What had happened to us? What had I done to deserve this? How had I gone from being the mother who loved him with everything I had to the woman standing in front of him, receiving nothing but leftovers and cruel words? He didn't look at me again as he turned and walked out of the room, and just like that, he was gone. Thanksgiving, once a day of warmth and joy, now felt like an insufferable reminder of everything I had lost. I stood in that kitchen, the silence, deafening, the smell of the meal still lingering in the air, and I realized just how much I had failed as a mother. I had worked so hard to provide for him, but I had neglected the one thing that mattered most, the love and connection between us. As I stood there, holding the leftovers he had handed me, I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my entire life. My son, the person I had given everything for, had just handed me the scraps and said it was all I deserved. After that Thanksgiving, I felt like I was living in a fog. The sting of Michael's words, "This is all you deserve," reverberated in my mind constantly. Each time I closed my eyes, I could still see him standing there, handing me the leftovers, with a cold, detached expression on his face. I thought maybe I had imagined it, but no matter how many times I replayed the scene in my head, the words didn't change. They were real, and the hurt they caused was real too. The days after Thanksgiving passed slowly. My phone sat silent as it had been for weeks. Michael didn't call, he didn't text. He didn't reach out in any way. It was as if the distance between us had grown so wide that there was no bridge to cross it. I tried to convince myself that it was just a phase, a temporary rift that we could overcome. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe he had his own struggles that he didn't know how to deal with. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a phase. Something had shifted between us, and I couldn't deny it any longer. The warmth that once filled our home had evaporated, and I was left in the cold, with only memories to cling to. I tried to busy myself with work, hoping that I could distract myself from the ache in my chest. But no matter how much I threw myself into projects, the loneliness remained. I couldn't stop thinking about Michael, about how things had changed so drastically. Where had the boy who used to run to me when he came home from school gone? Where had the son who would tell me everything, from his joys to his fears, disappeared to? I couldn't help but replay every moment in my mind, wondering where I had gone wrong. Had I been too focused on my career? Was it the long hours I spent working that made him feel neglected? I had always justified it by telling myself that I was providing him with a good life, that I was giving him the best education, the best opportunities. But now those excuses felt hollow. In my pursuit of securing his future, I had sacrificed my presence, and that, I now realized, was the one thing he needed most from me. I thought about his childhood, the way he would curl up next to me on the couch after school, how he would share every little detail of his day, eager to hear my thoughts. Those were the moments I cherished the most, when he needed me. And yet, somewhere along the way, I had missed the signs that he no longer felt the same way. The signs that he was withdrawing, that he was growing distant. Maybe it was when I started staying late at the office too often, when I prioritized deadlines over family dinners. Maybe it was when I stopped noticing that he was becoming someone I didn't recognize. The guilt consumed me. I tried to reach out, but every time I called, he didn't answer. Every time I sent a message, there was no reply. I left messages, pouring my heart out, but he never responded. I was left to wonder if my words even mattered to him anymore. I wanted to scream at him, to ask him what I had done wrong, but I knew it wouldn't help. The damage had been done, and it was my fault. Then one evening, nearly a month after Thanksgiving, I received a call from Michael. My heart skipped a beat when I saw his name on the caller ID. I hadn't heard from him in so long, and I didn't know what to expect. Part of me wanted to pick up, to act like everything was fine, but another part of me was terrified. What if he was still angry? What if the gulf between us had grown so wide that nothing could bridge it? I answered the phone, my voice shaky, trying to keep my composure. Michael? There was a long pause on the other end of the line before he finally spoke. Mum. I've been thinking a lot about Thanksgiving. I held my breath, unsure of what he was going to say. My heart pounded in my chest, my hands clammy. I shouldn't have said what I did, he continued. His voice was quieter than usual, almost apologetic. I was angry, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I've been mad at you for so long, and I never told you why. The words were like a weight being lifted from my chest, but it wasn't enough. I needed to know why. I needed to understand what had caused this rift between us. I don't understand, Michael, I said, my voice cracking. Why? Why have you been angry at me? Another pause, and then he spoke again, his words slow and deliberate. You were always working, always busy. I know you were trying to give me the life you never had, but I needed you, Mom. I needed you to be there for me, and I didn't feel like you ever were. You were always giving me things, but you weren't giving me yourself. I got angry because I didn't know how to tell you that I needed more than just things. I needed you. The truth of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. For so long, I had assumed that providing him with everything material was enough. I thought that giving him money, gifts, and opportunities would fill the void. But it didn't. What he needed was me, my time, my presence, my love. And I had failed him. I sat down on the couch, my legs suddenly weak, as the flood of emotions threatened to overwhelm me. Michael, I whispered, I never meant to hurt you. I never meant to make you feel like I wasn't there for you. I was so focused on giving you everything, I lost sight of what really mattered. He didn't respond immediately. I could hear him taking a deep breath on the other end of the line, like he was gathering the courage to say something more. I know, Mom. I know you did the best you could, but I've been carrying that anger for a long time. I didn't know how to let it go. I'm so sorry, I said, my voice breaking. I'm so sorry that I wasn't there. I love you more than anything, Michael, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. The line was silent for a moment before he spoke again. I don't know how we fix this, Mom, but I want to try. I don't want to be angry anymore. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe we could rebuild what had been broken. But I also knew it wouldn't be easy. It would take time that we didn't have a lot of. I want to try too, I said. Softly, I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. But I need you to know that I'm here for you. I always have been. Even when I wasn't there, I was always thinking of you. I know, he said, his voice a little stronger now. I know. And I'm sorry for everything I said. I didn't mean it. I know you didn't, I whispered after a long pause. Michael finally said, I'll come by soon. We can talk more, maybe we can start over slowly. Please, Michael. I'd like that, I said, tears streaming down my face. We hung up the phone, and I sat there, feeling both a sense of relief and a deep sadness. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and there were no guarantees. But in that moment I realized that maybe, just maybe, we could heal. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be a start. And for the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe that things could get better. The weeks following my conversation with Michael were a strange mix of hope and uncertainty. After our phone call, I didn't hear from him right away. I waited. The silence between us seemed louder than ever, and I found myself looking at my phone constantly, hoping for a text or a call. But nothing came. I couldn't help but feel a pang of anxiety every time the phone rang, only to see it was someone else, someone other than my son. I tried not to let it get to me. After all, he had said he wanted to try. He said he'd come by. And even though part of me feared he would change his mind, I tried to hold on to that tiny sliver of hope. I had already been waiting for years. What was a little longer? But, deep down, I knew this would be the true test. It wasn't just about me apologizing to him. It was about him coming to terms with his own feelings, with the anger and resentment he had carried for so long. I couldn't force him to heal, but I could be patient, give him the space he needed, and offer my love and understanding when he was ready. Days turned into weeks, and I finally heard from him. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Michael. Mum, I've been thinking a lot about everything we talked about. I'd like to meet you for lunch today. Let's talk. The words were simple, but they filled me with a rush of emotion. My hands shook as I read the message. He wanted to meet. He wanted to talk. That was more than I had dared to hope for in all the months since Thanksgiving. I quickly typed back, my fingers trembling as I sent my reply. I'd love that, Michael. I'll be waiting. I couldn't focus on anything else that morning. The hours felt like they were stretching on forever, each minute dragging as I awaited the moment I would finally sit face to face with my son again. My mind raced with thoughts of what we might say, how it would go. Would there still be anger? Would he forgive me? Would we be able to start fresh? Or would the past weigh too heavily on us both? At noon, I arrived at the restaurant we had frequented in the past, one of the places where Michael and I had spent countless weekends together, laughing over meals and talking about everything under the sun. It felt strange to be there without him, knowing the space between us was filled with unresolved emotions. But I tried to push those thoughts away. Today would be different. Today we would begin to heal. I arrived early and sat at our usual table, my hands folded on the table in front of me. My heart raced, and I could feel the tension building inside of me. Was this a mistake? What if things didn't go the way I hoped? And then, a few minutes later, Michael walked through the door. He looked just like he always did, his eyes a little tired, his steps slower than I remembered. But he was here. That was all that mattered. He spotted me right away and gave me a small, tentative smile. It wasn't the wide grin I remembered, the one that would light up his face when he was excited to see me. But it was something. It was a start. "Hi, Mum," he said quietly as he sat down across from me. His voice had a vulnerability to it that I hadn't heard in years. How have you been? I smiled softly, though I could feel my heart aching with a mixture of love and sadness. I've been okay, Michael. Just trying to keep busy, you know? But I've been thinking about you a lot. He nodded slowly, staring down at the table for a moment. I've been thinking about you too. About everything. I've had a lot of time to process things. The weight of his words hit me hard. He was trying to make sense of everything, just like I had. There was so much I wanted to say, but I didn't want to rush him. This was his moment as much as it was mine. Finally, he met my eyes, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the hint of a smile on his face. It wasn't a smile of joy, but it was something softer, something genuine. I've been really angry at you for a long time, Mom, he said. His voice was steady, but I could hear the hurt in it. And I know I've been holding on to that anger, even though I never told you why. But I realize now, it wasn't just about you not being there. It was about me feeling like I wasn't enough, like I wasn't worthy of your time or attention. The word struck me like a blow. I had never intended to make him feel that way. I had always thought I was doing the right thing by providing for him, by working so hard to give him the life I thought he deserved. But I had missed the point. The point wasn't the things I gave him. It was the love, the time, and the connection. I didn't provide. I couldn't take back the years I'd spent working late, or missing out on important moments. I couldn't undo the distance that had grown between us. But I could finally listen. I'm so sorry, Michael, I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. I never meant to make you feel like you weren't enough. I was trying to give you everything. But in the process, I lost sight of what you really needed. You needed me. I should have been there for you, and I wasn't. And I'm sorry. Michael didn't immediately respond. For a few moments, he just looked at me, his face unreadable. I didn't know if he would forgive me, or if the words would be enough. But then, he reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough to say that he was willing to try. I'm angry, Mum, he said, his voice quieter now. But I'm not angry at you anymore. I think I just needed to understand why you did what you did. I needed to know that you were doing it because you loved me, not because you didn't care. I do love you, I replied, tears welling up in my eyes, more than anything in the world. And I'm sorry that I didn't show you that in the right way. We sat there for a while, just holding hands, letting the silence speak for us. There was no instant fix. There were no magic words that could erase the past. But in that moment, I knew we had taken the first step toward healing. It wouldn't be easy, and we both had a long way to go. But it was a start. It was the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. I don't know if things will ever go back to the way they were, Michael said after a long silence, his voice thick with emotion. But I want to try. I don't want to be angry anymore. And I don't want to feel like I lost you. You didn't lose me, I said, squeezing his hand. And we can't go back, but we can move forward, together. And as we sat there, talking and slowly rebuilding the connection that had been lost for so long, I realized something important. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't admitting that you were wrong, it's accepting that healing takes time. But, as long as we were both willing to try, we would find our way back to each other. The journey wasn't over, but I could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that in itself was enough to give me hope.